So now we're going to talk about some of the other features in Magnum. And one of the things we can deal with is reports. And they have reports for tile lines for devices and for subscriptions. Like for subscriptions, you can actually click on it and see what is associated with that subscription. You can also go into tile lines if you have tile lines set up, and it'll actually show you what sources or destinations are tied together through the tile lines. The main thing that I use it for panels, and this will show you what panels are connected after you refresh it. And I'll use this for, like, if I have a panel in the house and I want to see if it's actually connected, I'll go in here and refresh and see if I can see the panel. The other thing that's very useful with this is to go into the live log, and the live log will show you everything that's going on. You can actually search for a certain thing, so you can set your date of when it happened, the approximate time, and then some keyword in here. It can be a destination name or a source name or something else that you're looking for to see when something happened. An example of this would be if somehow an input to an EVS got changed that the operator said he didn't do. You can go back and look at that destination number and see who actually made the route. And it'll even tell you the panel IP that made the route. So if maybe there's accidentally a destination on another panel that you didn't want, this will help you to find it. So that can be a very handy tool. We go in the controls tab and you can do quick routes. And quick routes is really just a single source to a single destination. There's other things you can do on this page, such as firing salvos. But usually when I do my routes, I do it in advanced routes, because then you can see everything, you can scroll through everything, and it's a little bit easier to kind of get around instead of having to search for a certain thing. But quick routes will use the groups that you created, the categories. You can search by those as well. But advanced routes will get you through pretty much everything. And in advanced routes, you also have the virtual, which is usually what we use, but there's also the physical tab, and that's going to look at the physical source numbers. And you can see a lot of the audio stuff is in here. And you can still change the different devices if you want to go to the EQX source or something along those lines. But again, usually advanced routes is where we do most of our things. Now, salvos is the other thing we use a lot too, and that again is under controls and salvos. And salvos are your recording routes. And you can create routes. You can create a new salvo, which you click on new up here, and you can refresh the table. So say you select everything that's on here and you refresh it. It's going to show you what routes you have done. In this case, there's not many routes going to these subscriptions, but if there were, the whole thing would populate, and you can make changes in here, and you can use this route tool tab. So say, for example, if I wanted to route black to all of these, I'd only have to put it in the first button up here, hit repeat sequence, and apply, and it just routed black to everything. You can use that to make a black monitor salvo if you wanted to, or say if I didn't want to do it that way, I want to go to route tools, and I wanted to say my first one was CCU1, my end source CCU 20, and for my level I only want to do video, apply. So now I just did my routes. And then to save that, I can click on the little disk here and call it something like cam sub, and it's going to create a new subscription, cam sub. Now I can also save as if I wanted to keep that one, but I maybe made a little change over here. I can do a save as. Now I'll create another new subscription with my changes. And I can add different things up here. If I wanted to add another source or another destination that wasn't available, I can add those in here and they would pop up. Now, one thing you have to be careful when doing salvos. Salvos live within a show file, but it's not a show file on its own. So there are people who will save a salvo, and then they'll have all these salvos in there of the different show files. And the problem with that is if you try and do it kind of like an example of what's done here, where they have all these different ones, which is okay, but if something happens to this file, you're going to lose everything else. Versus if you save it in admin, you're going to save the salvo part, but you're also going to save the names that you did, the panel configs, all that stuff. So this is only looking at routes. It's not looking at panel layouts. It's not looking at colors. It's not looking at the names. It's not looking at anything else. It's only looking at the routes. So that's all you're saving right here. You're not saving anything else. But you do need to have a subscription one, because in most of the versions of Magnum that our trucks have, if the truck was to lose power, all the subscription routing would be lost, and the subscriptions wouldn't actually route until you fired a salvo. So it's good to have at least a subscription one. And you can also do a black to monitors for at the end of the day if you're leaving the truck powered up. You don't have to do black to VIPs, just do black to the monitor inputs. And to do that, for example, so we're going to create a new one, and we're just going to type in mon. So now this is looking at all the monitors. I'm going to select all, go to my route tools, and I'm going to select black as my source. And repeat sequence and apply. So now I've just routed black to all those monitors. I can save that. Black to mon. And I haven't actually sent this yet, so there's no changes really done to the monitors. So now that I've got them grouped the way I want them, I could click on this and say refresh table. And assuming this was a live system, I would have things routed in here, and I could do a save as, and this is going to have whatever was normally routed to that monitor, and I can save that as black to monitor off. And it tells me there's no valid routes because there's nothing actually in here, but normally you'd have VIPs in there or whatever was going there, and it would save it. So here I can either get rid of something that I've done, or I could actually fire a default from here. Now you'll notice I can fire these ones that are black, but the ones that I just edited, I can't fire, and I can't fire them until I do an upload. And again, on my upload, if there's things that I didn't want to do, I could remove them. If I wanted to. But again, you just have to be careful. Remember that a salvo lives within a show file. A salvo is not a show file on its own. There have been situations where someone has saved all of their shows for an entire season inside the salvo of one main default, and then something happens, that file gets corrupted, and they have nothing to go back to. So you can do it for a couple of them if you have just minor changes and you want to save that within your, in this case, the Red Sox file, that's fine. But if you're saving basketball, baseball, football for all different clients inside one main show file, you're doing a couple things. You're not saving the panel layouts, and you're not saving the names that you need to. But also if something happens, it's just not safe to have that little bit in there. You really want to have things saved as much as you possibly can. It's also good practice when you're doing a show file to be as descriptive as you can in the name. So a couple of things here. Download active is what is actually on the Magnum server at that moment. Download working is changes that have not yet gone. So like right now, if I save download working, it's going to save these changes that are in the queue. If I do download active, it's not going to save these. So the best practice for saving a show file is to do your salvos first, do an update of all the different salvos that you have, send those, and then do a download active. So you're saving what's actually on the server at that point in time. Now every time you do an upload, it creates a snapshot, and you can actually revert back to that snapshot at that time. If you did something you didn't like or something's acting weird, you can go back to a snapshot at a certain time and fire that, and it gives you a timestamp on here so you know which one you're doing. And this before is where we imported the config. That's what we did at the initial reset system you don't want to do. That resets it back to the factory settings with nothing set up in there, so you really don't want to do that. You can create a new snapshot if you want. You say at this point I really like to save that so I can go back to it quickly, and that would be just fine. Now the other thing you can do in this admin tab is go to preferences, and preferences is where you can set the color up at the top border. You can also import a very small JPEG file. It tells you the size here, and you can select it off your computer. The other thing is you can change the header. And hit set server name. I just changed it up there. And you can move it around wherever you want. Now the audio group size is set initially, and normally it's 1 on all of our trucks, and you do not want to change that. If you do, the audio will not route properly with the video. So that is something you really do not want to touch. Now plugins over here is where you do your scripts, and that's your buddy panels. And really the only thing you touch in here is the IPs, and so it has to go both ways to the panel. So you have two panels, like 130 and 131 are buddies. So it has to go this way to 130 to 131, and then it has to go 131 to 130. If you wanted to add another panel, you could do it right in here. You could copy these two rows if you wanted to. And paste them in. And then go and change the IP address if that's what you wanted to do. Or you could export this and go into Notepad or a simple word processing program and save it and import it. Because one thing you do, if you do this here and you want to save it, it's going to save it over top of your file. So if you don't want to do that, if you just want to add a buddy panel for just one show, you'd actually want to export this and save it somewhere first, and then you could save it over top of it. And then once you're done doing your edits on here and changing the IPs to match the panel that you want to click on Apply Scripts, and it'll tell you up here that scripts are running successfully. And you could also delete an existing script or add a script if you wanted to import one. But that would have to come from another one. But you can actually edit it on here. You just have to be very careful of the syntax so that you make sure you have commas in the right place, that you have everything exactly the same as what's already on here, and your spacing, everything stays the same, and don't touch anything down here. Now you do also want to know that you have to have the right version depending on the panels that you're using. And with buddy panels too, they have to be these types, has to be the 2272s and the 1040s. It has to be on that version, and there's several different versions in the company, so it's possible if it's not working that you have the wrong version of firmware on your panel. And the best way to test these, when you have two buddy panels that are together, hit the destination on one of them and it should show up in the window of the other panel. So that way you know the two panels are switching together. And if they're not, the first thing that I do is go in here and hit Apply Scripts. And it'll tell you the scripts are running successfully. And if that doesn't work, then I make sure that both panels are actually switching, that one panel isn't locked up, and you can reboot the panel locally, and then you may have to apply scripts again. If you go into Help, that's where we were before with the About, and that tells you the version of Magnum. And the other thing you can do is retrieve logs. You can get the logs and send them to someone else who needs them, as you can in reports as well. The live logs, you want to get just a certain section of things that's going on. So that's kind of a brief overview. So that kind of sums up the different menus and the different parts of the things that we're doing. We don't deal with internationalization. That's dealing with languages. Um, and there are some more advanced things that we'll get into in a later video.